Some rulers spent decades fighting for power, others inherited entire kingdoms before they could even walk. In fact, one ruler on this list became king the exact moment he was born. Throughout history, royal succession could be unpredictable. A sudden death, a political crisis, or a broken royal lineage could place the crown on the head of someone incredibly young. In this video, we're counting down 10 rulers who took power at shockingly young ages, ranked from the oldest to the youngest when they first became the official leader of a kingdom or empire. Number 10. Alexander the Great, age 20. Alexander the Great became king of Macedon at just 20 years old in 336 BCE after the assassination of his father, Philip II. Although he had been trained for leadership since childhood and studied under the famous philosopher Aristotle, taking control of a powerful kingdom at that age was still a huge responsibility. At the time, Macedon had already established itself as a major force in Greece. Alexander inherited a strong army and a kingdom that was preparing for future military campaigns. Even though 20 may sound like adulthood today, ruling an entire kingdom at that age was still considered very young, especially in a time when political experience was highly valued. Number 9. Cleopatra, age 18. Cleopatra VII became ruler of Egypt at around 18 years old after the death of her father, Ptolemy XII. Following the traditions of the Ptolemaic dynasty, she initially ruled alongside her younger brother, who also held the royal title. However, Cleopatra quickly became the dominant political figure in Egypt. At only 18 years old, she held authority over one of the most important kingdoms in the Mediterranean world. Egypt was still wealthy, powerful, and strategically important, making the role of ruler extremely demanding. Her early rise to power placed her among the youngest monarchs in Egyptian history, and that was at 20 years old. But the rulers higher on this list became kings and emperors much earlier, some while they were still children. Number 8. Akbar, age 13. Akbar became the emperor of the Mughal Empire in 1556 when he was only 13 years old after the death of his father. At the time, the Mughal Empire already controlled large territories across northern India. Because of his young age, experienced advisors and generals initially helped manage the empire. However, the imperial title officially belonged to Akbar, making him one of the youngest emperors to ever rule such a large and powerful state. Holding the title of emperor at 13 meant that the future of the empire technically rested in the hands of a teenager. Number 7. Edward VI, age 9. Edward VI became King of England in 1547 at just 9 years old after the death of his father, King Henry VIII. Because Edward was still a child, powerful regents governed the kingdom in his name during the early years of his reign. Even so, Edward remained the official monarch of England. All royal authority technically came from the young king, even though experienced advisors handled most of the government decisions. Becoming ruler of one of Europe's most important kingdoms at 9 years old made Edward one of the youngest monarchs in English history. Number 6. Tutankhamun, age 8-9. Tutankhamun became pharaoh of Egypt at around 8 or 9 years old during the 14th century BCE. Ancient Egypt had a long tradition of royal succession, but placing such a young prince on the throne meant that senior officials and advisors were responsible for many political decisions. Even so, Tutankhamun remained the official ruler of Egypt throughout his reign. Child pharaohs were rare, and becoming the leader of one of the ancient world's most powerful civilizations at such a young age made Tutankhamun one of the youngest rulers in Egyptian history. Now the ages start getting even more surprising, because the next rulers inherited their thrones before they were even 1 year old. Number 5. Henry VI, age 8 months. Henry VI became King of England in 1422 when he was only 8 months old. He inherited the throne after the death of his father, King Henry V, one of England's most famous medieval rulers. Because Henry was still an infant, the kingdom was governed by regents, who ruled on his behalf. However, from a legal perspective, the crown already belonged to him, making him the official monarch despite being less than a year old. Number 4. Sobhuza II, age 4 months. Sobhuza II became King of Swaziland, now known as Eswatini, in December 1899 when he was just over 4 months old. He inherited the throne after the death of his father, King Wayne V. Because Sobhuza was still an infant, the kingdom was governed by his grandmother, Labotsibini Mbluli, who served as regent and managed the affairs of the state. Even though she handled the responsibilities of government, Sobhuza officially held the royal title from infancy. Becoming king at just a few months old makes him one of the youngest monarchs in recorded history. Number 3. Puyi, age 2. Puyi became the emperor of China in 1908 when he was only 2 years old. As a toddler, he was placed on the dragon throne inside the Forbidden City and became the ruler of the Qing dynasty. Because of his extremely young age, the empire was governed by regents, who made decisions on his behalf. Even so, the imperial title officially belonged to Puyi, making him one of the youngest rulers in the history of China. Number 2. Mary, Queen of Scots, age 6 days. Mary became Queen of Scotland in 1542 when she was only 6 days old. Her father, King James V, died shortly after her birth, immediately placing the newborn princess on the Scottish throne. Because she was still an infant, the country was governed by regents during the early years of her life. Nevertheless, legally speaking, Mary had already become queen less than a week after being born. Number 1. Alfonso XIII, age 0. Alfonso XIII became King of Spain in 1886, the exact moment he was born. His father, King Alfonso XII, had died months earlier while the queen was still pregnant. Because of this, the newborn prince automatically inherited the throne immediately after birth. Since he was an infant, his mother ruled as regent until he reached adulthood. Becoming monarch at the moment of birth makes Alfonso XIII one of the youngest rulers in recorded history. History is full of powerful kings and emperors, but very few began their rule so early in life. From teenagers suddenly inheriting kingdoms to infants who technically became monarchs just days, or even moments, after being born. These rulers show how unpredictable royal succession could be. And if a newborn can become king, it raises an interesting question. How much real power did these rulers actually have? Let me know in the comments which ruler surprised you the most.